In the vast emptiness of space, where alien empires rise and fall like cosmic storms, there exists a legend whispered in 1,000 different tongues across 1,000,000 worlds. They speak of the Terran ghost, a human who fell from the stars 50 millennia ago onto the forsaken world of Kythera Prime. The locals watched him crash, watched him bleed, watched him die, or so they thought. But humans don't die easily. They adapt. They survive. They endure. Now, as the crimson sun sets on what was once a simple mining colony, something stirs beneath the ancient ruins. The ground trembles. The very air hums with an energy that tastes of iron and determination. After 50,000 years of slumber, the last guardian of Earth opens his eyes to find himself surrounded not by enemies, but by an army 10,000 strong, each bearing the unmistakable genetic markers of humanity. The galaxy forgot about Earth. It forgot about the species that once dared to reach for the stars with nothing but chemical rockets and stubborn willpower. But the children of Terra remember. They've been waiting. They've been preparing. And now, their sleeping ancestor has finally awakened. The universe is about to remember why humans were feared across every sector of known space. Not for their technology. Not for their numbers. But for something far more dangerous, their refusal to give up, even when all hope seems lost. The first sensation was cold. Not the gentle chill of morning air, but the bone-deep freeze that comes from sleeping in stone for centuries beyond counting. Marcus Kane's eyes opened slowly, neural pathways firing after 50,000 years of hibernation. The cryochamber that had kept him alive hissed as ancient seals broke, releasing pressure that had been building since before recorded history began on this world. His body moved like rusted machinery, muscles atrophied despite the preservation systems. Every joint protested as he sat up, and, for a moment, the simple act of breathing felt foreign. The air tasted different, thinner, with traces of minerals he didn't recognize. His enhanced lungs, products of military augmentation from a war fought when Earth still existed, adapted quickly to the atmospheric composition. The chamber around him was no longer the pristine medical bay of the UES Defiance. 50 millennia had transformed it into something else entirely. Crystalline formations grew from the walls like frozen tears, and the metal surfaces had taken on an organic quality, as if the ship itself had learned to live and breathe. Bioluminescent fungi provided the only light, casting everything in an ethereal blue-green glow that made the familiar seem alien. Marcus tried to access his neural implants, the quantum-linked systems that had once connected him to Earth's vast information networks. Static. Nothing but white noise where there should have been the constant hum of data streams and tactical overlays. Either the implants had failed during his long sleep, or there was simply nothing left to connect to. The thought hit him harder than any physical pain. If the implants were silent, if there was no quantum signature to lock onto, then Earth was truly gone. He forced himself to stand, bare feet touching floors that had once been pristine alloy but now felt almost organic beneath his touch. The ship had changed, evolved, become something new during his sleep. As he moved through the corridors, emergency lighting flickered to life, ancient sensors recognizing the biometric signature of their last living crew member. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with a slow heartbeat, as if the Defiance had become a living thing during its long exile. The bridge was unrecognizable. Where there had once been tactical displays and command consoles, now there grew a forest of crystalline trees that sang softly in harmonics he could feel in his bones. At the center, where his captain's chair had been, stood a pillar of living light that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. As he approached, the pillar shifted, reforming into something resembling his old command interface. "Status report," he whispered, his voice rough from disuse. The response came not through speakers, but directly into his mind through quantum resonance with his implants. The ship's AI had survived, had grown, had become something far beyond its original programming. It showed him the passage of time through sensor readings and gravitational measurements. 53,742 years, 8 months, 16 days. The precision was staggering, and somehow more terrible than approximate numbers would have been. It showed him what had become of the galaxy. The great civilizations of his time, the Altarian Federation, the Centauri Alliance, the Vega Collective, all fallen to dust and forgotten history. New empires had risen and fallen dozens of times over. The coordinates where Earth should have been showed only empty space and the fading radiation signature of a star that had burned itself out millennia ago. But there was something else. The AI highlighted energy readings from the planetary surface below, signatures that shouldn't exist on what the star charts labeled as Kythera Prime, a barely habitable mining world on the outer rim. The readings showed technology, civilization, and something else that made his enhanced heart race with impossible hope. Human DNA signatures. Thousands of them. The viewscreen activated, showing the surface of the world where his ship had crashed so long ago. What he saw defied explanation. Where there should have been the rough mining settlements recorded in his last tactical briefing, there now stood a city that seemed to grow from the planet itself. Spires of living crystal reached toward the stars, connected by bridges that looked more grown than built. And, moving through this impossible metropolis were figures that, even at this distance, moved with the distinctive gait of humans. How? He asked the empty air. The AI's response came as a flood of archived data, sensor readings taken during his long sleep. It had watched over him, yes, but it had also watched the world below. It had seen the survivors of his crew emerge from their own damaged chambers one by one over the first century. Had watched them adapt to this new world, interbreed with the local population, and slowly transform both themselves and their new home. The transformation had been gradual, guided by human ingenuity and alien biology working in harmony rather than opposition. His crew hadn't conquered this world, they had joined with it, creating something entirely new. The crystalline formations that now filled his ship were the same technology that built the city below, a fusion of human engineering and Kytheran biotechnology that had taken millennia to perfect. Marcus studied the readings more carefully, his enhanced mind processing data at superhuman speeds. The human population below wasn't just surviving, they were thriving. The genetic diversity showed careful cultivation, with clear signs of directed evolution. They had enhanced themselves, adapted to this world while maintaining their essential humanity. They were stronger, more resilient, more intelligent than the humans of his era. They were what humanity could become given enough time and the right circumstances. But there was something else in the readings, something that made his blood run cold despite his joy at finding his people alive. Energy signatures on the far side of the planet, growing stronger by the day. Weapons signatures he recognized from his old life, the kind of firepower that could crack planets. Someone was coming to this world, and they weren't coming in peace. The AI showed him the trajectories, the gravitational distortions that indicated massive ships dropping out of hyperspace in the outer system. A fleet was approaching, and, based on their course and speed, they would arrive within days. The energy signatures were alien, but the tactical formations were familiar to any military mind. This was an invasion force. Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in millennia, pure, undiluted rage. His people, his descendants, had found peace on this world. They had built something beautiful, something that honored both human ambition and alien wisdom. And now someone wanted to destroy it. He accessed the ship's weapon systems, hoping against hope that something remained functional after so many years. What he found surprised him. The weapons had evolved too, grown beyond their original specifications. The quantum cannons were still there, but they were now integrated with crystalline focusing arrays that multiplied their power exponentially. The missile batteries had been replaced with something the AI called living projectiles, weapons that could think, adapt, and learn from their targets. But, even with these upgrades, the Defiance was still just one ship against what appeared to be an entire battle fleet. He needed allies, needed to make contact with the surface and somehow convince the people there that he was who he claimed to be. After 50,000 years, would they even remember him? Would they care? The answer came as he attempted to establish communication with the surface. The moment his transmission reached the city below, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of voices spoke as one, carried on quantum frequencies that bypassed normal communication entirely. They had been waiting. All this time, through all the generations, they had been watching the skies for his awakening. Ancestor, they said, the word carrying weight and reverence that made him shiver. You have returned to us in our hour of need. We are your children, grown strong in your shadow. We have prepared for this day. As if summoned by their words, he could see through the viewscreen as figures began to emerge from the city below. Not fleeing, not hiding, but gathering. They moved with purpose and coordination that spoke of long preparation. These weren't helpless colonists waiting for rescue, they were warriors, evolved and trained for war, and they were rising to meet the threat that approached their world. Marcus smiled for the first time in 50,000 years. The galaxy had forgotten about humanity, had written them off as another extinct species. The approaching fleet thought they were coming to claim an easy prize from a primitive world. They were about to learn why humans had once been feared across every star system in known space. Not because they were the strongest, or the fastest, or the most technologically advanced. But because when threatened, when pushed to the edge, humanity didn't break. They adapted. They evolved. They became something more dangerous than their enemies could imagine. The Defiant shuddered as its awakening systems reached full power, and, far below, 10,000 descendants of Earth raised their faces to the stars, ready to remind the galaxy what it meant to face the children of Terra in battle. The invasion fleet was still days away, but Marcus Kane was already planning their defeat. He had lost one world to alien aggression. He would not lose another. Not while a single human heart beat in defiance of the dark. The transportation down to the surface was unlike anything from Marcus's memories. Instead of mechanical shuttles or teleporter arrays, the Defiant simply grew a pod around him, living crystal that formed itself to his body like a second skin. The descent through the atmosphere felt more like swimming through liquid light than falling through air, and, when the pod finally dissolved to release him onto the surface, he found himself standing in the heart of the city he had seen from orbit. The first thing that struck him was the smell. Not the recycled air of starships or the chemical tang of terraforming equipment, but something organic and alive. The city breathed around him, its crystalline spires expanding and contracting in a slow rhythm that matched his own heartbeat. Bioluminescent patterns flowed through the translucent walls like neural pathways, carrying information and energy in ways his augmented mind could barely comprehend. The second thing was the silence. Thousands of people moved through the streets and bridges above, but they moved with a coordination that needed no spoken words. They communicated through quantum resonance, their enhanced nervous systems linked in ways that made them more than individuals while somehow remaining utterly human. The third thing was that they were all watching him. As he walked through the city center, figures emerged from the living buildings to line his path. Men and women who carried themselves with the distinctive confidence of humans, but whose bodies showed the gradual adaptations of 50 millennia. They were taller than the humans of his era, their bones denser and their skin bearing a subtle crystalline pattern that caught the light. Their eyes held depths that spoke of genetic memories passed down through countless generations. At the center of the city stood a structure that defied easy description. It rose from the ground like a fusion of crystal and organic matter, shaped by will rather than engineering. As Marcus approached, the surface rippled and a doorway formed to admit him. Inside, he found himself in a vast chamber where representatives of his descendants waited. They stood in concentric circles around a central dais, each circle representing a different aspect of their civilization. Warriors whose bodies showed integration with weapons systems that had become part of their biology. Scientists whose neural augmentations had grown far beyond anything from his era. Engineers who could shape matter with thought alone through their symbiosis with the planet's crystalline network. And, at the center, three figures who radiated an authority that needed no explanation. The speaker was a woman whose age was impossible to determine. Her hair was silver but her face was unlined, and her eyes held the accumulated wisdom of millennia. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated directly with his enhanced neural implants. Marcus Kane, captain of the UES Defiance, last defender of Earth, sleeper who guarded us through the long night. We are Zara Chinkithara, voice of the first generation, daughter of your engineer Elena Chen and the crystal singer THYSS Era. We speak for all who came after. The names hit him like physical blows. Elena Chen, his chief engineer, who had been working on the biointegration protocols when the ship crashed. She had survived, had lived, had found love and purpose on this alien world. The knowledge that at least one of his crew had lived to see peace brought tears to his eyes that he didn't try to hide. How many, he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Of your original crew? 47 survived the initial crash. All but 3 chose to stay when the rescue never came. They built new lives here, merged their technology with Kitharan bioscience, and created something the galaxy has never seen before. They are gone now, aged beyond even our extended lifespans, but their memories live on in us. Their knowledge, their dreams, their stubborn human refusal to surrender. Zara gestured to the assembly around them. We number 10,736 as of this morning. Each of us carries the genetic heritage of Earth and the adapted biology of Kythera. We are the children of two worlds, and we have spent 50,000 years preparing for this moment. What moment? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. The moment when the galaxy would rediscover us and decide we were too dangerous to live. The chamber around them shifted, walls becoming transparent to reveal holographic displays showing the approaching fleet. Marcus studied the formations with a tactical eye that had been honed in humanity's last great war. 47 heavy cruisers, 16 dreadnoughts, and a flagship that was larger than anything he had ever seen. The design was unfamiliar, but the weapons' signatures were clear enough. This fleet could reduce a planet to molten slag in a matter of hours. Who are they? He asked. The Zarathi Dominion, answered another figure, a man whose skin bore the geometric patterns of integrated armor plating. They claim dominion over this entire sector, though their claim is recent and built on conquest rather than colonization. They catalog worlds, strip them of resources, and eliminate any species they consider potentially threatening. And they consider us threatening? Zara smiled, and the expression was both beautiful and terrible. Our quantum signatures are visible from 50 light-years away. Our cities grow from pure will. We have integrated alien biotechnology with human engineering in ways that should be impossible. We represent evolution beyond their understanding. Of course they consider us threatening. The displays around them showed more than just the approaching fleet. They revealed the true scope of what his descendants had built. The city he stood in was just one of hundreds scattered across the planet's surface. Underground complexes stretched deep into the planet's crust, connected by quantum tunnels that allowed instantaneous travel. Orbital installations that had grown from his crew's emergency shelters now controlled gravitational fields and could manipulate matter at the atomic level. But it was the people themselves that were the real revelation. Each of the assembled representatives was a masterwork of biological and technological integration. They had enhanced themselves not through crude mechanical implants, but through careful genetic modification and symbiosis with Kytheran crystal technology. They were faster, stronger, and smarter than baseline humans, but they were also something more. They were connected, linked through quantum resonance that allowed them to think and act as a collective when needed while maintaining their individual personalities and free will. "Show me your defenses," Marcus said. What they showed him defied everything he knew about warfare. The planet itself had become a weapon. The crystalline formations that grew throughout the cities were not just buildings, they were focusing arrays for planetary-scale energy weapons. The underground tunnel network wasn't just for transportation, it was a three-dimensional battlefield where defenders could appear anywhere instantly. The orbital installations weren't just habitats, they were fortress factories that could manufacture weapons and warriors at need. But the most impressive defense was the people themselves. Each of the 10,000 was a warrior, soldier, scientist, and engineer all in one. They had spent 50 millennia preparing for war, studying the tactics and strategies of every species they encountered, and developing countermeasures for technologies that didn't even exist yet. They were ready for anything the galaxy could throw at them. "Why did you wait?" Marcus asked. "With these capabilities, you could have conquered half the galaxy by now." "Because," Zara replied, "conquest was never our goal. We learned from the mistakes of old Earth, from the wars that destroyed our homeworld. We sought only to survive, to preserve what was best about humanity while adapting to our new reality. We became strong not to dominate others, but to ensure that no one could dominate us." She paused, her expression growing serious. "But survival sometimes requires that you remind others why you should be left alone. The Zarathi have made their intentions clear. They see us as resources to be harvested or threats to be eliminated. They have given us no choice but to demonstrate what we have become." The chamber filled with a low harmonic as thousands of voices joined in quantum communication. Marcus felt the edge of it, his own implants picking up fragments of the vast conversation taking place around him. They were coordinating, planning, preparing for a battle that would decide the fate of their world and, quite possibly, the future of humanity itself. "What do you need from me?" Marcus asked. "Lead us," Zara said simply. "You are the last link to old Earth, the keeper of our military traditions. Our people are strong, but they have never faced a threat of this magnitude. They need someone who has fought in the void between stars, who has seen civilizations rise and fall, who understands the true cost of war." Marcus looked around the chamber at the faces watching him. Young faces that carried old souls, enhanced minds that still held to fundamentally human values, warriors who had inherited both the ruthlessness and compassion that defined their species. They were asking him to lead them into battle against an enemy that outgunned them 10-1, that had technology he didn't fully understand, that commanded resources beyond imagining. They were asking him to risk everything they had built over 50,000 years on a single throw of the dice. He thought of Elena Chen, who had chosen to build rather than seek revenge. He thought of his old crew, who had found love and purpose on an alien world. He thought of Earth, burning in the void while its children scattered to the stars. And he thought of these people, these impossible, magnificent people who had taken the best of humanity and made it something new and wonderful. "When do we begin?" he asked. The answer came as the crystalline city around them began to sing, a harmonic that reached into orbit and beyond, calling the children of two worlds to war. In the depths of the planet, ancient weapons stirred to life. In orbit, defensive platforms that had disguised themselves as asteroids for millennia revealed their true nature. And, across the surface, 10,000 descendants of Earth prepared to show the galaxy what happened when you threatened the children of Terra. The Zarathi fleet was still 3 days out, confident in their superior numbers and technology. They had no idea that they weren't approaching a primitive mining world ripe for conquest. They were entering a trap 50,000 years in the making, walking into the domain of a species that had learned to make peace with the universe but had never forgotten how to make war. Marcus Kane stood at the center of it all, no longer just a survivor but a symbol of everything humanity had been and everything it could become. The last guardian of Earth had awakened, and he was not alone. The War Council convened in what had once been the planet's largest mining complex, now transformed into a command center that merged human military doctrine with Kitharin quantum linking technology. Marcus stood before a three-dimensional display that showed the approaching fleet in real time, their energy signatures burning like angry stars against the darkness of space. The Zarathi Dominion had sent more than just a conquest force, they had sent an extermination fleet. Around him, the military leaders of the hybrid civilization took their positions. Each represented a different strategic capability that had been developed over the millennia. There was Commander Tarek Hassanveltar, whose expertise lay in void warfare and whose body incorporated living metal that could reshape itself into weapons platforms. Beside him stood General Sarah Kozlovzenth, whose neural architecture had been enhanced for tactical coordination across quantum-linked forces. The bioengineer Yuki Tanaka Mordun could grow spacecraft from crystalline seeds in a matter of hours. Each of them was both fully human and something far beyond what humans had been in Marcus's era. Status of the Zarathi advance? Marcus asked, slipping into the familiar role of military command as if 50,000 years were merely a long night's sleep. Commander Hassanveltar gestured to the display, and the holographic fleet expanded to show individual ship configurations. 47 Talon-class heavy cruisers, each armed with plasma bombardment arrays capable of cracking continental plates. 16 Dominator-class dreadnoughts with planetary siege weaponry. The flagship appears to be a Worldbreaker-class vessel, we've seen the aftermath of what those can do. Entire systems reduced to asteroid fields. Marcus studied the formations with growing concern. The Zarathi weren't approaching in a standard battle configuration. They were deploying in a pattern designed for systematic extermination, with overlapping fields of fire that would allow them to sterilize the planet's surface while remaining safely out of range of conventional defensive systems. Time to contact? 68 hours, 17 minutes, General Kozlovzenth replied, her voice carrying the harmonic resonance that indicated she was simultaneously coordinating with defensive installations across the planet. They're taking their time, confident in their overwhelming superiority. Standard Zarathi doctrine calls for a demonstration of power before the final assault. They'll bombard one of our smaller settlements to demand surrender. And, if we refuse? Total planetary sterilization. They've done it to 17 worlds in the past decade alone. The general's expression was grim. The Dominion considers any species capable of interstellar travel to be a potential threat. They eliminate such threats before they can develop into actual challenges to Zarathi supremacy. Marcus absorbed this information while studying the tactical display. The approaching fleet represented the accumulated military might of an interstellar empire, technologies refined through countless conquests, weapons systems that had never tasted defeat. By any rational analysis, the defending forces should be overwhelmed in a matter of hours. But rational analysis had never fully accounted for human nature. "Show me what we have to work with," he ordered. The display shifted to reveal the true scope of Kithaeron defensive preparations. What appeared to be a single inhabited planet was actually a fortress that had been 50,000 years in the building. The crystalline cities on the surface were just the visible portion of a vast defensive network that extended through the planet's crust and out into the surrounding space. Bioengineer Tanaka Mordan activated a series of overlays that revealed hidden installations throughout the system. "We have 17 orbital platforms disguised as asteroids, each equipped with quantum phase weapons that can punch through any known shielding. The planetary surface houses 43 primary defense nodes connected by quantum tunnels. An attack on any position can be reinforced from anywhere else on the planet within seconds." More overlays appeared, showing the underground cities that honeycombed the planet's interior. Subterranean manufacturing facilities can produce defensive platforms at exponential rates. "We've been stockpiling materials for millennia. We can sustain a siege for decades if necessary." But it was the final overlay that made Marcus smile with something approaching his old battlefield confidence. "And this?" The planetary defense grid. Every crystalline formation on the planet's surface is part of a single integrated weapons system. We can focus the planet's entire defensive output through any single point, creating energy concentrations that rival stellar outputs. Marcus nodded slowly, pieces of a plan beginning to form in his enhanced mind. Population distribution? "All non-combatants have been evacuated to the deep shelters," General Kozlovzenth reported. "The surface installations are manned entirely by volunteer defense forces. 10,736 souls willing to fight for their home." "And the Defiance?" Commander Hassenveltar's expression brightened. "Your ship has been fully integrated with our defensive network. The biocrystalline modifications have enhanced its capabilities beyond original specifications. It's no longer just a heavy cruiser, it's a living weapons platform with firepower equivalent to a small fleet." The tactical situation was becoming clearer. The Zarathi expected to face a primitive world with minimal defenses. They were approaching in a standard extermination formation, designed to overwhelm through superior numbers and firepower. But their very confidence would be their weakness. They weren't prepared to face an enemy that had spent 50 millennia preparing for exactly this type of assault. "Tactical doctrine?" Marcus asked. "The Zarathi rely on overwhelming force applied from beyond effective retaliation range," General Kozlovzenth explained. "They establish orbital supremacy, then conduct systematic planetary bombardment until all resistance is eliminated. They've never encountered effective opposition to this strategy. Then, it's time they learned what happens when they face an enemy that refuses to follow the script." Marcus studied the display for several more moments, his enhanced mind running through tactical scenarios at superhuman speed. "I want 3 defensive phases. First, we let them get close enough to commit to their standard assault pattern. Second, we demonstrate that their assumptions about our capabilities are fatally flawed. Third, we show them what happens when humans decide to stop playing defense." The assembled commanders exchanged glances through quantum link communication too rapid for Marcus to follow. When they reached consensus, Zarach and Kithara spoke for all of them. "You're planning something beyond simple planetary defense. The Zarathi Dominion has made a career of exterminating species they consider threatening," Marcus replied. "They've turned genocide into an art form, convinced that superior firepower is the answer to any problem. It's time someone taught them that there are things more dangerous than big guns and overwhelming numbers." He gestured to the tactical display, highlighting specific formations within the approaching fleet. "They're not expecting resistance. They're not prepared for an enemy that thinks strategically rather than simply reacting to immediate threats. And they certainly aren't ready to face humans who have had 50,000 years to perfect the art of war. The next 18 hours passed in intensive preparation. Marcus found himself amazed by the efficiency of his descendants' military organization. Where his era had required complex command structures and formal orders, these hybrid humans coordinated through quantum resonance with a precision that made them more effective than any army in galactic history. He watched as biocrystalline weapons platforms grew from seed pods in a matter of hours, their living metal hulls adapting to specific tactical requirements as they formed. Saw soldiers whose enhanced genetics allowed them to survive in hard vacuum without life support, their modified physiology making them perfect for close-quarters combat in space. Observed engineers who could reshape matter at the molecular level, turning asteroids into weapons platforms or creating camouflaged installations that were invisible to conventional sensors. But, perhaps most impressive was their absolute confidence in victory. Not arrogance, they understood the odds they faced. But, a calm certainty that they would prevail, because failure was simply not an option. They had inherited humanity's stubborn refusal to surrender, enhanced it with alien wisdom, and forged it into something unbreakable. As the Zarathi fleet entered the outer system, Marcus took his position aboard the Defiance, now seamlessly integrated with the planetary defense network. Through quantum resonance, he could feel the thoughts and emotions of every defender, could coordinate their actions as if they were extensions of his own body. It was intoxicating and terrifying, the power to command an entire civilization's military might through force of will alone. The enemy fleet began its final approach, confident and unhurried. Their communications traffic, intercepted and decoded by Kitharan quantum listeners, revealed their complete disdain for any possible resistance. They saw a single inhabited world with no apparent space-based defenses, no orbital installations, no evidence of advanced military technology. Another easy conquest for the glory of the Dominion. Marcus smiled as he watched them deploy into their standard extermination formation. The Zarathi had built their empire by facing enemies that fought according to conventional military doctrine. They had never encountered an opponent that had spent 50 millennia studying their tactics, preparing countermeasures, and developing strategies specifically designed to exploit their weaknesses. They were about to learn the most important lesson in human military history: when facing the children of Terra, there is no such thing as an easy conquest. The battle for Kithra Prime was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. The first shot of the battle came not from the approaching Zarathi fleet, but from Admiral Thexbar himself, commander of the extermination force. His flagship, the Eternal Dominion, launched a single plasma torpedo toward the planet's largest city not as an act of war, but as a demonstration. The message was clear: surrender now or face total annihilation. Marcus watched the torpedoes approach through the Defiance's enhanced sensors, feeling the quantum-linked tension of 10,000 defenders waiting for his command. The weapon was designed to level several city blocks, to show the primitive inhabitants below what would happen to their entire world if they resisted the inevitable. "Let it through," Marcus ordered, his voice carrying across quantum frequencies to every defensive installation on the planet. The torpedo struck the crystalline spires of New Geneva, the settlement built on the site where the Defiance had first crashed 50,000 years ago. The plasma warhead detonated with the force of a small nuclear weapon, vaporizing several kilometers of the city in a burst of superheated gas and radiation. For exactly 3 seconds. Then, the city began to rebuild itself. The crystalline structures flowed like liquid light, rebuilding and reinforcing themselves faster than the destruction could spread. What had been vaporized reformed from quantum templates stored in the planetary network. The plasma fires were absorbed by biocrystalline matrices that converted the destructive energy into raw materials for reconstruction. Within minutes, New Geneva stood exactly as it had before, unmarked by the assault. Aboard the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Thexbar stared at his sensor readings in disbelief. His staff officers scrambled to verify the data, running diagnostic checks on their equipment, convinced that their instruments were malfunctioning. The torpedo had definitely struck its target. The energy release had been measured and confirmed. But the target showed no damage whatsoever. "Impossible," the Admiral hissed, his reptilian features twisting in confusion. "No civilization has defensive technology that advanced. Our intelligence reports indicated a primitive mining world with minimal technological development. His tactical officer, a scarred veteran of dozens of planetary exterminations, studied the readouts with growing unease. "Sir, there's something else. We're detecting massive energy buildups across the planetary surface. Whatever we just hit, it's responding." Indeed it was. Across Kythera Prime, the crystalline formations that the Zarathi had dismissed as primitive architecture began to glow with internal light. The planetary defense grid was powering up, drawing energy from the planet's core through quantum tunnels that channeled stellar-level forces through living crystal matrices. The very ground beneath the cities began to sing with harmonic frequencies that made reality itself tremble. Marcus felt the power building beneath his feet, felt the collective will of his descendants focusing their rage through the planet itself. Through quantum resonance, he could sense their determination, their absolute refusal to allow their world to suffer the fate of so many others. They had spent 50,000 years preparing for this moment, and they would not be found wanting. Admiral Thexvar, Marcus transmitted on standard galactic communication frequencies, his voice carrying the authority of old Earth and the power of New Kythera. "I am Captain Marcus Kane of the United Earthship Defiance. You have attacked a sovereign world without provocation. You have one opportunity to withdraw your forces and leave this system unmolested." The response was immediate laughter, broadcast on all frequencies so the entire fleet could share in their admiral's amusement. "Earth? That dead rock burned out millennia ago. There are no humans left in the galaxy except as slaves in our breeding pits. You are either deluded or attempting some primitive deception. Either way, your world will burn." "Your choice," Marcus replied, and cut the transmission. The second phase of the battle began with the Zarathi fleet opening full bombardment. 47 heavy cruisers and 16 dreadnoughts unleashed their full firepower in a coordinated assault designed to crack the planet's crust and expose its molten core. Plasma beams, particle cannons, and quantum disruptors struck the surface in a display of destructive power that should have reduced any world to a lifeless cinder. Instead, the planet absorbed the assault. Every beam, every missile, every quantum-charged particle was caught by the crystalline matrices and channeled into the global defense network. The energy that should have destroyed cities was instead converted into power for weapons systems that had been growing in strength for 50 millennia. Across the surface, defensive installations that had appeared to be simple crystal formations revealed their true nature as they began to return fire. The first Zarathi ship to die was the heavy cruiser Talon's Edge, struck by a beam of coherent quantum energy that punched through its shields and hull as if they were made of paper. The weapon that killed it had drawn power from the entire planetary grid, focusing the defensive energy of an entire world into a single devastating shot. Admiral Thexvar watched in horror as his carefully planned assault turned into a massacre. His ship's weapons were having no effect on the planet below, while the defensive fire was systematically destroying his fleet one vessel at a time. Each shot from the surface was more powerful than his ship's main guns, and they were coming from hundreds of different locations simultaneously. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his staff. "No single world can generate this level of firepower." His science officer, frantically analyzing the energy readings, looked up with terror in his eyes. "Admiral, they're not generating it. They're focusing it. Every defensive installation on the planet is linked through some kind of quantum network. They're drawing power from the planet's core and channeling it through. I don't know what to call it. It's like they've turned the entire world into a single massive weapon." "Then, we destroy the planet," Thexvar snarled. "Prepare the World Breaker Cannon. Full power." But, as the massive weapon aboard his flagship began to charge, the third phase of the battle commenced. Space around the Zarathi fleet suddenly filled with new contacts. What had appeared to be asteroids revealed themselves as camouflaged weapons platforms, their biocrystalline hulls unfolding like deadly flowers. Ships grew from quantum seeds, their living metal hulls taking shape as their crews quantum tunneled directly into their command centers. And, through it all came the Defiance, no longer the battered refugee ship it had been 50,000 years ago, but a living weapon that had grown and evolved into something that defied classification. Commander Hassan Beltar led the Void Assault, his enhanced body interfacing directly with his bioship as it danced between Zarathi formations like a living thing. His weapons were not merely technological, they were alive, able to adapt and evolve in real time to overcome enemy defenses. Where conventional ships fired projectiles or energy beams, his vessel released clouds of quantum phage weapons that ate through whole metal and converted it into more of themselves. General Kozlov Zenth coordinated the overall assault through quantum resonance, her enhanced neural architecture allowing her to process tactical data from hundreds of sources simultaneously. She could see the entire three-dimensional battlespace as a single unified field, directing her forces with precision that made every shot count and every maneuver perfectly timed. But it was Marcus himself, aboard the transformed Defiance, who struck the killing blow. As Admiral Fexfar's flagship charged its world-breaker cannon, preparing to crack Kythera Prime open like an egg, the ancient Earth vessel appeared directly beside the massive dreadnought. The Zarathi had built their world-breaker to be invincible, protected by shields that could deflect stellar-level energies and armor that could withstand direct hits from antimatter warheads. But they had never faced weapons that grew stronger by feeding on the energy used to defend against them. The Defiance's biocrystalline hull made contact with the enemy vessel and began to convert its hull metal into more of itself, spreading like a technological virus that consumed the ship from within. Admiral Fexfar had time for one final transmission before his flagship was completely absorbed. "What are you? What have you become?" "We are human," Marcus replied as the Eternal Dominion was consumed and converted into raw materials for the growing bioship network. "We are what happens when you push the children of Terra too far." The battle lasted 4 hours and 37 minutes. When it ended, the Zarathi Dominion had lost an entire extermination fleet without destroying a single building on the planet's surface. 47 heavy cruisers, 16 dreadnoughts, and 1 Worldbreaker-class flagship had been either destroyed or converted into biocrystalline vessels that now served the growing human fleet. But, more importantly, every moment of the battle had been broadcast across quantum frequencies that reached every corner of the galaxy. The message was clear and unmistakable: humanity had returned. The children of Terra were no longer refugees hiding in the dark corners of space. They were a force that could challenge the greatest military powers in the galaxy and emerge victorious. As Marcus stood on the bridge of the transformed Defiance, looking out at the growing fleet of converted Zarathi vessels, he felt something he hadn't experienced since before Earth's fall: hope. Not just for survival, but for the future. His descendants had not merely endured their exile, they had used it to become something magnificent. The galaxy had forgotten about humanity. But now it would remember. And the universe would never be the same. The war with the Zarathi Dominion was just beginning. But, for the first time in 50,000 years, the children of Earth were fighting not just to survive, but to reclaim their place among the stars. And they were winning. 3 months after the Battle of Kythera Prime, the galaxy was in chaos. The destruction of Admiral Fexfar's extermination fleet had sent shockwaves through every civilized system, but it was what happened afterward that truly terrified the established powers. The mysterious humans hadn't simply defended their world, they had begun to spread. Marcus stood in what had once been the Zarathi Dominion's primary military command center, now converted into a crystalline cathedral of living light that served as the headquarters for humanity's return to galactic prominence. Through quantum resonance, he could feel the presence of his descendants as they worked throughout the captured facility, their enhanced minds processing tactical data from across the entire sector. The transformation had been swift and absolute. Within days of their victory, biocrystalline seeds had been planted throughout the Zarathi home system. The seeds grew into communication relays that linked back to Kythera Prime, allowing instantaneous coordination across interstellar distances. More importantly, they had begun to convert asteroids and dead worlds into forward bases, creating a network of human installations that stretched across dozens of star systems. But it wasn't conquest in any traditional sense. The humans of Kythera Prime had learned hard lessons from the mistakes of their ancestors. They didn't seek to dominate through force or establish an empire built on subjugation. Instead, they offered something far more powerful: liberation. Commander Hassan Beltar materialized beside Marcus through quantum translocation, his living armor rippling with data streams from the ongoing operations. "The Altuiran resistance cells have accepted our offer of assistance. Their rebellion against Zarathi occupation begins in 6 hours." Marcus nodded, studying the holographic displays that showed the spread of human influence throughout the galaxy. It was remarkable how quickly word had traveled. Oppressed species that had suffered under Zarathi rule for generations were suddenly finding hope in the stories of a world that had not merely survived an extermination fleet, but had utterly destroyed it. Status of the Vegan Liberation Front? They're requesting bioenhancement technologies to help them survive in the toxic environments the Zarathi created on their homeworlds. General Kozlov Zenth has approved limited genetic therapy packages, nothing that would fundamentally alter their species, but enough to help them reclaim their poisoned worlds. The approach was delicate and carefully considered. Where the old Earth had sometimes tried to impose human values on alien species, these evolved humans worked within existing cultural frameworks. They provided technology, advice, and military support, but always in service of each species' own liberation rather than human dominance. And the Centauri Coalition? Hassan Veltar's expression grew more complex. That's more complicated. They're not under Zarathi occupation, but they're terrified of what we represent. Their military command is convinced we're planning to conquer them next. It was the challenge Marcus had expected. The Zarathi Dominion had been universally hated, making them an easy enemy to unite against. But what happened after the oppressor was defeated? How did humanity reintegrate with a galaxy that had written them off as extinct, and which now feared their return? The answer came from an unexpected source. Zara Chenkithara entered the command center, her quantum-linked presence carrying news that made Marcus's enhanced heart race with possibilities. "We've received a response from the Galactic Council," she announced, her voice carrying harmonics of excitement and apprehension. "They're calling for an emergency session to address the human question. We've been invited to send a representative." Marcus felt a smile tug at the corners of his mouth. The Galactic Council, the loose confederation of species that had formed in the wake of the great wars that consumed the galaxy after Earth's fall. They had established themselves as the closest thing to a galactic government, though their authority was more moral than military. The fact that they were acknowledging humanity's return was significant. "Who are they expecting us to send?" They specifically requested the last guardian of Earth, you. "It seems your reputation has spread beyond our wildest expectations." The journey to the council chambers on Neutral Sanctuary Station took 2 weeks through conventional hyperspace, though Marcus could have been there instantly through quantum translocation. But arriving through normal space travel was itself a message that humanity was willing to play by galactic rules when it suited their purposes, but was not bound by them. The bioship that carried him was a marvel of hybrid technology, grown rather than built, its living hull capable of adapting to any environment or threat. As they approached Sanctuary Station, Marcus could see the assembled fleets of a dozen different species, each maintaining careful distances from the others. The galaxy remained fractured, held together more by fear of chaos than by any real unity. The council chambers were an architectural impossibility, a spherical space where representatives from radically different species could meet despite incompatible environmental requirements. Atmospheric zones shifted and flowed around each delegation, maintaining the precise conditions needed for each species to survive. Marcus found himself assigned to a human-compatible area that hadn't been used in over 40,000 years. The other representatives watched his arrival with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and outright hostility. He recognized some of the species, descendants of civilizations that had existed during humanity's first expansion into space. Others were entirely new, evolved or emerged during the long millennia of human absence. The session was called to order by Coordinator Yextaith of the Sanctuary Collective, a crystalline being whose species served as neutral arbiters throughout the galaxy. Its voice resonated through translation matrices that made its words comprehensible to every species present. "We gather in response to the emergence of the human faction calling itself the Children of Terra. Recent events have demonstrated capabilities that pose significant questions for galactic stability. Captain Marcus Kane, you speak for this faction?" Marcus stood, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. "I speak for the descendants of Earth, yes. But I'm not here to threaten or demand. I'm here to clarify our intentions and address the concerns of the galactic community." "Your forces destroyed an entire Zarathi extermination fleet," interjected Ambassador Vorduch of the Rigel Corporate Alliance, his insectoid features rigid with suspicion. "Your technology shows capabilities beyond anything in recorded galactic history."
How do we know you won't use this power to establish a new human empire?
The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around the chamber, representatives leaned forward, waiting for an answer that would determine humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. Marcus activated a holographic display that showed not weapons or fleets, but the world's humanity had liberated from Zarathi oppression.
Gardens growing on previously poisoned planets. Former slave species rebuilding their civilizations with human assistance.
Refugee populations being relocated to worlds that could support their unique biological needs. Because, Marcus said simply, we've learned from our mistakes. The old Earth sought to spread human values and human dominance across the galaxy.
We don't seek dominance, we seek coexistence.
We've spent 50,000 years learning how to adapt to other worlds, other species, other ways of thinking.
We're not the same humans who left Earth all those millennia ago.
He gestured to the display, showing the careful integration of human and alien technologies, the hybrid cultures that had emerged on liberated worlds.
We offer partnership, not submission.
We share our technology freely with any species that faces extinction or oppression. But, we will never again allow another species to dictate humanity's right to exist. The debate that followed lasted for hours, with representatives raising concerns about human technological superiority, questioning their long-term intentions, and demanding guarantees of non-interference and established territorial boundaries. Marcus answered each question with patience and honesty, making no promises beyond humanity's commitment to the right of all species to self-determination. But, it was the intervention of an unexpected ally that swayed the final vote. Ambassador Thysera of the Kitharin Collective, descendants of the species that had first welcomed human refugees 50,000 years ago, rose from her delegation's environmental zone. The humans came to our world as refugees, she said, her crystalline voice carrying harmonics of ancient memory. They were broken, defeated, the last survivors of a dead civilization. We could have enslaved them, or eliminated them as a potential threat. Instead, we chose to learn from each other. Look what we built together. She activated her own display, showing the wonder that was modern Kithara Prime, a world where two radically different species had not merely coexisted, but had evolved together into something neither could have achieved alone.
The galaxy fears human power, but power is not what makes them dangerous.
What makes them dangerous is their refusal to accept that any problem is unsolvable, that any species is beyond redemption, that any injustice is inevitable.
They don't conquer worlds, they transform them. They don't demand submission, they inspire evolution.
The vote, when it came, was closer than Marcus had hoped but decisive enough to matter. By a margin of 3 votes, the Galactic Council officially recognized the Children of Terra as a sovereign galactic power, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. As the session concluded and the various delegations prepared to depart, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since before Earth's fall, a sense of belonging in the wider galaxy. Humanity was no longer homeless, no longer extinct. They had a place among the stars once again. But, more than that, they had purpose. The galaxy was still fractured, still plagued by the same conflicts and inequalities that had led to Earth's destruction. Wars between species that could find no common ground.
Oppression of the weak by the strong.
The endless cycle of fear and retaliation that kept civilizations locked in patterns of mutual destruction. The Children of Terra had returned with more than advanced technology and military might. They had returned with wisdom born from loss, compassion learned through suffering, and the absolute determination to ensure that no other species would have to endure what humanity had endured. As Marcus's bioship departed Sanctuary Station, quantum-linked messages were already flowing back to Kithara Prime and the growing network of human installations. The real work was just beginning. The galaxy had accepted humanity's return, but acceptance was only the first step. Now came the harder task, showing a fractured universe what could be accomplished when species chose cooperation over conquest, adaptation over domination, evolution over extinction. The last guardian of Earth had awakened to find himself not alone, but surrounded by 10,000 descendants who had spent 50 millennia preparing for this moment. The galaxy had forgotten what humans were capable of when they refused to surrender. It was about to remember. And the universe would be transformed by that memory, one world at a time, one species at a time, until the dream of a truly unified galactic civilization was no longer just a dream, but reality. The children of Terra had come home. And they had brought hope with them.